Today, I'm talking with Lily Sais. Lily is a former school psychologist and the founder of Peace from Within, where she helps people struggling with anxiety find freedom not through doing more to fix themselves, but by doing less and accepting who they are. Her work is grounded in a method developed in the 1970s called the 3 Principles, which are mind, thought, and consciousness. And she guides clients to understanding anxiety as part of the fundamental human experience, not something to fix through therapy, meditation, tapping, morning routines, and all the things we're frequently fed as magic elixirs that will erase our pain. Lily came to this work through her own experience with anxiety, panic, and obsessive-compulsive disorder that made it difficult for her to function, from driving to experiencing intrusive thoughts to fearing social engagements. After years of trying multiple methods to heal herself, Lily realized her anxiety was largely a result of misinterpreting her feelings. The moment she stopped giving undue importance to her anxious thoughts and stopped trying to fix how she felt, everything changed. This simple method doesn't require constant time, money, or energy. Instead, it's a mindset shift, a reset button that helps people reclaim their lives and understand, in the words Lily uses to describe herself, that the only thing that was wrong with me was thinking there was something wrong with me. Lily, welcome to Here For Me.
Thank you for having me. I love listening to that. I was like, yes.
You're like, yes, this is what I do. Well, I am thrilled to have you on the show because to me, you are the future of mental health. That's what I'm going to call it. And that is coming to understand that being human is complicated and having feelings is part of the journey and not something to fix. And I think so much of what is wrong with us is this narrative, as you have identified, that there's something wrong with us or that there is a normal, which there kind of really isn't a normal. I don't have to tell you that. And that we shouldn't experience pain and instead seek to understand, accept it. I'm just going to rant for a second that I'm also fed up with what I would call a patriarchal society that feeds us shame, conjoined with like a capitalistic and materialistic society that tells us we can fix that shame if we buy things that help us lose weight and make our wrinkles go away and, newsflash, cure our anxiety. And I want to encourage people to think about the messaging that they're fed and where that's coming from. Is that something you're going to have to buy over and over? Thinking it's going to make you feel better about yourself. Is this something you need to fix, which we're going to talk about? And who profits from your shame? That's something that I've been looking at a lot. So thank you for creating a program that defies all of that, because people do pay you for your services, obviously, but what you do is teach people to find peace inside of themselves. And I think that is just all too rare.
Thank you. Well, and I love that. That's why I have so many thoughts about money and, my own insecurities coming from even, making a living, anything to do with mental health. And that's why I love podcasts like this and sharing on social media, because I get thousands over the years of like people that just your simple videos. Oh, just this video, just this concept. Wait, that I'm not broken, that what if the only thing wrong with me is that I think there's something wrong with me?
Or that.
And so it's so many people that actually there is nothing to buy, just realizing that they had it wrong, that there was something wrong with them, like whether it was an intrusive thought or a panic attack or whatever, like just a simple insight. And I hear that from so many people that, oh my gosh, they never looked at it that way. And they just got curious. Is there less for me to do? Like, am I not broken? Am I not weird? Am I not the only one? Because so many people think nobody has anxiety like me. Or this is probably more than anxiety.
Yes.
And then often when I share in a very light way, they're like, oh, so I don't know. Yeah. So I love that you brought that up though, because it's like we can really live in this feeling like something is wrong with me. And our brain's like, well, here is this evidence, and then it feels true rather than, oh my gosh, I'm just living in this feeling of my thinking that this feeling is wrong or this, whatever, know, and it's like, wait, what if that's all just thinking? And actually, I am enough just as I am, and there's nothing I need to do.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny when you brought up that people think no one else suffers from it. I feel like increasingly, and I'm so glad about this, I'm so glad about the mental health awareness that is in this world right now, because people will say, this is just how my brain works. Welcome to me. Welcome to my life. Welcome to my weird brain. I hear myself saying that, and you realize actually everybody's brain is weird. Is different or is unique, and I feel like we're almost normalizing it. And that's what you're doing, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Because if it's also normal, it can be so much more temporary, where it's like, oh, wait, from something silly of like, oh yeah, I might worry about having to pee before I get on a plane, or I'm going to record a podcast, or I'm going to get a massage. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's can be 1 second, rather than you're living in this feeling, what's wrong with me? Why do I worry about peeing before every podcast or every massage? And you think it's some problem that you need to fix. And then you realize, or anything of like, sometimes I get nervous before a party where I don't know people. Rather than thinking it means something about you. Like, I guess I just have social anxiety now. It's like, wait, what if you just, it can be so much more fleeting and so much more temporary and not a big deal or not as intense. It's like, yeah, sometimes I have butterflies in my stomach before I'm going to record a podcast, or before I'm going to go to a party, or before I'm, I don't know, there's so many different options. And it doesn't mean like, oh, this is some character flaw, or I need now more self-confidence, or I need more social confidence, or better social. Like, it's like, oh, wait, I don't, I think people can sometimes really take it as meaning something about their mental health or their who they are as a human being.
It's like there's like two sides to a label, right? I think some people are like, oh, there's a label. Now I'm comforted because there's something wrong with me. But then it's almost like a trap or a framework or a box that you feel like, well, now I can't get out of it and I have to learn to operate in this. And you're like saying, no, there's no box. It's like I had a therapist that would say, riding the waves. Just get on your surfboard and ride it. You'll get to shore. Like you're saying, it's temporary.
Yeah.
Just go with it. It's okay. You're going to be nervous. It's very normal to be nervous I'm nervous before I go on my own podcast. So it's totally a normal response to being a human in the world.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's start with your journey, because you came to this work through your own experience with anxiety. How was that manifesting for you, and how did you try to resolve it?
Yes. Well, until around age like 27, it was more just, to me, I don't know what the word was. It really took a turn after I had a panic attack. But before that, as a child, I worried about something bad happening to my parents. I was really influenced by like movies or books, in The Witches, the parents die and in a car crash.
Why is everyone an orphan in a fairy tale? Like,
and so
Bambi and whatever. Yeah.
It was so many parents dying. And my parents are wonderful, and they live big, full lives. I actually grew up here in Pasadena.
Oh, cool.
For the first 11 years, and then moved to Santa Monica.
Okay.
But they would go out to dinner, and I was terrified every time most of the time they would get in a car, because I thought they could die in a car crash. And it seemed so big and real to me. So, being younger, a lot of the fears were just about my parents dying, something happening to them, and then me being kind of left alone. We had a wonderful housekeeper who I love, but she was elderly, and I'd be like, well, then my parents are going to die, and she's probably going to die. So I was kind of always preparing for the worst of like, I guess it's just going to be me. And honestly, until I was 11 or 12, I thought in Punky Brewster, which is a TV show from the 80s, but Punky's parents like abandon her, or her mom leaves her. And I thought that my parents were going to abandon me. So all the time, that's the feeling that I lived in. And so even up until we moved from Pasadena to Santa Monica, the reason we moved was so I could go to a great private school. And I can remember my mom was a few minutes late and thinking, today's the day she's going to abandon you. And I remember the logical part of my brain was like, well, why would they wait 11 years? And literally it said, there just wasn't a good time. And I'm like, yes, like that felt so true. But all of that was also like fine, it was, and then kind of, that would morph into like health anxiety thoughts, which I didn't know, there wasn't really the term for that, but just being much more anxious. But it felt very real to me. Like I'm really worried about real things, and nobody's as worried as me. And then, but when I had my daughter and was starting to feed her food, I was going to CrossFit, and they had this big mural, and I'd already recovered from an eating disorder. So I was kind of skeptical of like, I don't want to fall into it, but there was this beautiful mural on the wall. And it was about avoiding things and whatever, eating certain things. And so I just then was like, let me research this. What is this that they're talking about? And it was a book on paleo style eating. And I'm like, this is everything I've been looking for, because it seemed like a roadmap. If you avoid these foods and you eat these things, you will avoid physical and mental illness. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I can sometimes, for good or bad, like I can obsess and get really, so I went such down a deep hole. And it didn't just stop at food, because it was like, well, there's stuff in the cleaning products and there's stuff in your air and cookware. And why I'm bringing that up is I think it's kind of started this stage of just really ramping up my thinking and my obsessing. And then I think it set the stage for when I did have a panic attack. So in that phase of like orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with health, but again, it seemed so real. Like,
and you have evidence.
I have evidence.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're like,
exactly.
science has backed that. I've followed paleo and still mostly do for a long time. So it's easy to do that because it also makes a ton of sense, right? So you're like, wait a minute, this isn't that. You're trying to believe that it's not true.
Yeah. And I think I'm not knocking anything, because I think I can, it's like, but I got so deep into like so black and white, and so fear-based. It was more like it was started from love, but it went so to fear, of like, I would, I don't want to go off on a big tangent, but even like trying to feed my daughter in preschool, it was like parties are like pizza and cupcakes.
And you're like,
so
no.
I would be having a hard, honestly, like at there, but I wouldn't want to overly restrict her and like bring her own cupcakes all the time, because then she could be anorexic and die from that. So
it's just a
and then
hamster wheel.
I read a book about being zero waste. I'm like, this is great. All of my waste should fit in a ball jar, and so I was like, I'm going to be zero waste, and nobody should use plastic. And I'd bring my own things to Whole Foods to like get frozen yogurt, or if we were even doing that. And so like just seeing other things, I would be, in the stress response.
Yeah.
So all of that was kind of setting the stage to, I had a panic attack driving on the freeway.
Oh my God, of all places.
I know, on the 10 freeway.
Oh, hello.
I was, at this time, it was my second year as a school psychologist. And often when you're starting out, you're at a few different schools. But at this point, I was at 2 different districts. And I had a panic attack, and I thought I was losing my mind. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. Mine involved kind of this weird, unreal feeling, like super speeded up. And so after that, I ramped up my mental health care even more, because I'd already been into mental health. But I was like, well, now I
And P.S., you're a psychologist.
So
it's like what you do. So we're going to trust what you say and feel,
Yes. So I ramped it up even more. And also, all of it's so interesting to me. Like, all that paleo stuff, yes, it was there, but like, I'm so into it. Biohacking, rewiring my brain. So I don't know if it was before then, but then it was like neurofeedback, somatic therapy. Also, I love everything about like the natural healing too, like crystals and Reiki and tapping.
Girl, we are into the
yoga
same stuff.
therapy, like, and even eating cleaner. So I just was doing, and grounding, meditation. I got certified to teach meditation in schools. I went to a 3-day long Vedic meditation training. Like, all of this like lights me up, and is exciting, but I was doing it thinking, I'm really broken. And like, this is really bad. And a panic attack to me felt horrible, but it also felt like this was the verge of me losing my mind. So I gotta try really hard, and so I was just so hungry for information of like, okay, my miracle morning, and I'm going to, have my mantras, and maybe it needs to involve some sort of religion and chanting, and essential oils, and, rewiring my brain like Joe Dispenza, and, and maybe eating 30 grams of protein in the morning and avoiding. And so
all the things that you see everywhere that are recommended, and you're like, I'm just going to do all of it. And then that becomes an obsession of its own.
Exactly. Yeah. And then grounding techniques and earthing mats. And so I just thought about myself and my mental health a lot. And my life got pretty small. And then I did, cognitive behavioral therapy, because At one point, I didn't drive on the freeway for a year, which is a lot in LA.
Man.
And I rode my bike from Santa Monica to Hollywood a couple days a week, which was also like really fun.
Yeah, it's fun and it's good for you. It's good exercise, it's good fresh air, but you're avoiding something.
I was. Yeah. And so, some things would help. Like I'd get back to driving on the freeway with the help of cognitive behavioral therapy, which, but it was still so much hard work. Then I was like always thinking and working, and I would sing. I did these like techniques and they helped.
Sure.
But I was like terrified and was still working so hard. And that was when I went, back to the internet and like typed in, I don't know, anxiety, panic, help, and up pop, now who's a good friend and a colleague, Sari Taylor. Mm-hmm. And she had like a 5 or 7 day anxiety kind of panic program. And she just sent you a simple video that was 30 minutes long. And it was introducing the 3 principles. But like, I don't know if she even said that word, but it was one of the first insights that was like, I kind of started to see that maybe I didn't need to do as much. And I got curious about that because I was tired. And so everything that I, it was like, maybe I didn't need to do so much. And maybe everything that I was doing, but I saw it without judgment. Like maybe everything that I was doing was kind of contributing to why I kept having panic attacks on the freeway, despite all my hard work. And so I just kind of got curious about what she was sharing. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest shift was it was so like, the overarching message was I wasn't broken and there was less for me to do. And I'd never really heard that in that way. Yeah. And also with Sari, her anxiety was just as bad as mine,
So she could relate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think until then I'd worked with wonderful people, but I had this belief, well, they don't get it. Like they don't know it.
They don't know
I'm
it.
kind of insane.
Yeah.
And
you're believing there's something wrong with you.
I'm really ill.
Yeah.
So with Sari, there was something like, one, she was saying exactly what I needed to hear, but I was also, I think, like, all right. So that's what led me into this understanding. And I could talk more, but I'll pause maybe now.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's kind of like you went into, how this unfolded and what changed for you. Talk more about the 3 principles and what they are all about. And basically, like, I'm curious how they were effective in helping you find relief, and then how you bring that into your work now, because thought, mind, and consciousness, right? Like it's funny because a lot of Hear For Me listeners, I was talking to a couple recently, and they knew immediately. I said, well, Lily's going to come on. She's going to talk about thought, mind. They're like, oh yeah, 3 principles, thought, mind, consciousness. And I was like, oh, so I think we have a mindful audience, but not everybody knows about it. So share more about that and how that changed things for you.
Yes. Well, one of my first insights listening to Sari was that my wisdom, which that can kind of be in the principle of mind, which is just this innate intelligence that we all have, that's just here in the world, that grows an acorn into an oak tree, that, whale song or people growing babies, and how our bones heal, and how, that there's just like, to me, like a zebra, like we can see this innate intelligence or salmon swim upstream and birds migrate, and how there's like different types of birds. And then like a little dandelion comes out of the concrete. So there's this innate intelligence that's in us, this intelligence behind our brain. So I am a very hardworking person, and very like thoughtful, and can be perfectionistic, but like a lot of like hardworking. And so that's kind of the approach that I had to like my mental health. And so it makes sense to think a lot and to take this seriously, because it is a panic attack, driving, and mental health. And when I realized that my wisdom got me through every panic attack, that was beyond my thinking. And so I realized I got through that first panic attack. I had no idea it was coming. I found a place to park. I called my mom. I called my psychiatrist. I was like, So, because after that, for 7 years, I obsessively thought about a panic attack and tried to prepare for it. And I realized, wait, but I got through everything. And I think I felt such shame about all my panic attacks, because almost all of them were when I was driving, and I wouldn't be able to stop, except for one time I was able to drive after a panic attack, but I wouldn't drive. I'd have to have my husband come pick me up and my parents bring me back. And I was 30 and a school psychologist. And so it just felt like So when I realized that my wisdom got me through, it was like, And that was a really early insight. And then another principle is just about thought. And so the three principles are just facts.
Yeah.
And how they're talked about is like kind of just so simple that these are just facts. These are true. And sometimes when people realize how true they are, that sets them free. So like, wait, we all have this innate intelligence that's beyond our thinking. So it's safe not to think so much. And what happens with that is when you don't think so much, your head quiets down. And when our head quiets down, we just have clearer thinking.
Yeah.
We just start to feel better.
And your gut takes over, right? Your intuition knows so much, and you're like tamping it down by almost not trusting it and letting your head spin.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when our head is spinning, we can feel like we're losing our mind. We can feel really kind of crazy, or you can physically feel like you're having a heart attack, or you have shortness of breath, or nauseous. So there's all of these, ripple effects of having a really noisy brain. And then there's all these kind of the other way of when we realize that it's safe not to think so much and our mind quiets down, we have clarity and we kind of start to see like, and so it just is mentally and physically the different effects of leaving your thinking alone. Mm-hmm. And so I can go more into that, but I guess I'll share my insights and then, and then the second one was about thought. And so I guess it was two-part for me when I realized that just because I had a thought didn't mean it was true. So we have this innate intelligence, and then we also have a brain that's always chatting and sharing its opinion. And for me, that would look like scanning and be like, your arms are tingly and maybe you're going to have a panic attack. And I kind of thought that was like the word of God in a way. It was like, oh, okay, it's starting.
It's starting. I have no control over it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I just thought my thinking was so true. And so when I started to be like, maybe it's just this mental chatter, I didn't have to take it so seriously. And then the second part about the nature of thought is that it's transient. It flows all on its own. And again, there was less for me to do. So it's like, because I would do all my tapping, I loved tapping. I read all the research about it. And I think it's cool. Like, I'm not knocking it. It did help me actually in like an eating disorder recovery time. Mm-hmm. So I'm not knocking anything. I'm just saying for me, when I overcomplicated it very innocently. So if I thought, okay, here's this anxiety and panic coming, it's hard to do a lot when you're driving on the freeway.
Yeah,
first of all. I'd be like, well, what are my cognitive distortions? And is this...
Yeah. And what I'm thinking about all of this while I'm overthinking.
Exactly. And so then and so when I saw maybe I didn't have to take my thoughts so seriously and maybe they flow all on their own. Mm. So I might started to feel a little anxious and have my brain be like, maybe you're going to panic and maybe you're going crazy. I'd be like, I guess it just kind of turned down the volume. And I just genuinely really was curious, like, and then it would change.
Yeah.
And it was like I kind of didn't take the bait. And so I just kind of, it didn't. And I think also, it was like, and I would have a new thought. I'd kind of be like, I wonder if I need gas or something. And I'd be like, wait. Like, because before I would have worked so hard. And so just those two thoughts alone. In my beginning, consciousness, I had no idea what that was because I also used to have a story that I'm dumb. I still slightly have that. And so consciousness seemed like a big weird word.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't care. But I didn't even need to know what that was.
Yeah.
Until I started coaching. But just those two things that like, I'm made of wisdom and common sense. It's safe not to think so much. I don't have to do it's safe not to take my thinking seriously because I'm not broken. And my thinking flows all on its own. Like, and it was just like, I just had so much more lightness. Also, I think another thing was, so with Sari, she went to a mental hospital because when she was feeling really anxious. And that was my worst fear. I had this very misunderstanding. I think a lot of it was how mental health was kind of portrayed in maybe the 90s, like straitjackets. And I thought the panic attack was bad, but my next step was a mental hospital. And I was under this misunderstanding. I couldn't be a school psychologist. Like I couldn't still have my kids. So it made sense that I was so terrified to hold on. And when I saw Sari, and then also this other woman, Nicola Bird, they were both psychotherapists and moms. they both went to a mental hospital to get help for their anxiety, and they came out and they were great. So it was like instantly that fear was gone because these two women.
The stigma is gone. You're like, oh, wait a minute. This might just be, if you get to that point, that just is a stop on the road.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. I love
so
the reframe.
that was a huge, I was like, oh, that's not the end.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, so that just instantly like popped that bubble. So those kind of three things that it was like, well, who cares? Because those women are amazing. I look up to them. If I was them, awesome. That was enough to change my life. And because I had struggled after the panic attack with driving anxiety and panic and like severe anxiety for 7 years, when I realized how simple it was, I was like, why don't all the adults know this? Like, why didn't anybody tell me? Why was I? Because also one other thing in there, I would hold my breath when I'd get anxious. And then so many people recommend breathing techniques, which I'm not knocking, but I got a hyperfixation on. And so I would literally manually breathe from the moment I woke up, and it would linger for 3 weeks. And then I would go to breathwork classes, which are very cool.
Right.
Very cool here in LA.
Yeah.
But I'd go and I couldn't breathe effortlessly. So like so many of it sounds very silly, but everyone talked about like belly breathing and 4-7-8 breathing and alternate nostril. And I would go, but I became hyper-focused. So like an OCD obsession with my own breathing.
Oh.
And it was so, it was almost like I just really got in a habit. From the moment I wake up, I wouldn't realize it because the habit is kind of behind the scenes, and I would check on my breathing. But I would do this thing where I'd make myself swing a kettlebell 40 times to like, just to change my breathing.
Yeah.
And I would have like a reprieve for 2 minutes, but then I'd be like, is it there? And I would be obsessed with my breathing to the point that I felt like I had to manually breathe.
Oh, wow.
And it would be this habit for 3 weeks. And so I would get lightheaded and my chest would ache because I was like in this weird breathing. But then everyone kept being like, why don't you do breathing?
And you're like, I got to tell you why that's not going to work, because I'm trying that and it's not working. Yeah.
So I don't know why I shared that one, but that also fell away. So there was just so many, so why I was saying that is so many things that I tried, I think people share them because that really helped them. But me as a person who can be a lovely, weird, obsessive, wonderful human being, when I came into this, I was like, I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I did start kind of sharing it as a school psychologist. There's a great evidence-based curriculum. But I really was like, I want the adults to know.
I want to take this beyond like what I'm doing. It's so funny as you're talking about this. So I am OCD and OCPD, both, which is a big party, right? You understand this. But one of the things for me is the same. I have to be careful about what routines I get into because I lock into them and then I can't survive without them. And they're actually creating, I'm going to use the word harm, but that's probably harsh, but they're creating more issues. And so your method, and I'm not saying I've followed that exactly, but that was what I have to do less. I mean, I did things like unsubscribe from magazines, unfollow, people online that I was like, I got to read what they're, because I am obsessed with checking boxes and doing all the things. So for me, that's a big part of my anxiety. I will stay underinformed on the news. I don't have live television anymore. People are like, oh my gosh, you're not informed. Do you even know what's happening in this country? Yes, I do. I still, am plugged in enough. But I love what you're talking about because I think that a lot of people can get into that. And then it's like you're attached to the ritual and not the result of what it can bring you. And so you have to take a different approach.
Yeah. I love that you said that because I take care of myself in that way too, in terms of news, politics stuff. And now I know how to get out of it. And I also love myself. I think being this a conversation, I used to really think something was wrong with me.
Yeah. Talk more about that realization because I love that you were like, that's actually the problem. Yeah.
Well, and I think so much of my life has changed. I don't really experience much anxiety at all. Sometimes I feel like I have anxiety amnesia, which is funny because it's like if I do, in my mind, I'm like, I never experience anxiety. And then I'm like, but, I don't have panic attacks. I don't consider myself to have OCD. But I'm still me. But I used to think there's something wrong, like as if I should be like my parents who can very happily watch the news and have it on all the time. Or
Doesn't
my
affect
ex-husband
them.
who doesn't worry about the kids and he can see a video of like a Ferris wheel crash without being like, oh my God, they're never going on a Ferris. Like,
we can never go to a carnival.
yeah, which like I still would. But,
Yeah.
I used to think that there was a way I should be, I should feel. And I think I'm much more like, it's funny because when I stopped thinking about myself as much and just seeing how cool human beings are, I'm like been in more of a feeling of love for everybody, which includes me.
Yeah.
And so a couple of months ago, I did, was more watching videos about what's going on in the world, in Israel and in Palestine, and not to get political, but I had that in my mind, and my mind sometimes will replay things over and over and over. Sometimes not, but I used to probably would have been like, this means something more than that's what it's doing. And my son was turning 10. This was like May 29th, and we took his friends to a Dodger game. And I couldn't, I don't know what got set. Like I just kept seeing, like, I thought, how are we so privileged? I don't mean to at all make it political or anything.
No,
like I
go
just
for
was
it.
like,
Yeah.
how are, I felt horrible. And it felt like, how are we at the Dodger game with these kids when bad things is happening?
Yeah.
And, but I also was like, it was happening, but it also, like, it was less of a problem than it would have felt like 7 years ago. So I was having this experience, and I held it together and it was fine. And then I got home in the next day and I just could not stop crying. And I realized that I'd kind of trapped myself because I thought my brain would have this idea, because we have new thoughts, like make yourself a lovely iced coffee. Because I had this like cold foam that I was really in love with. And my brain would be like, hey girl, just like have a nice coffee. And I'd be like, you're so privileged. Like if you have a nice coffee and you feel better, you're denying the suffering of everybody. So I couldn't.
Yeah. I relate to this.
And I'm trying to think of like what got me out of it when it's not like, that's not wrong. Kind of like it's also, I wasn't thinking there was anything wrong with me, but I was really open to my boyfriend and I kind of couldn't stop crying. And then he brought up like Viktor Frankl. I can't remember. I'll try to like say it in a helpful way. But I think when it clicked was I can be in a feeling of love and a good feeling. And that didn't mean that my heart still wasn't breaking and I still didn't, as cheesy as it sounds, want
both.
world peace.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and that's why I, rather than thinking I'm broken, I'm so excited because there's always more insights for me to have. I continually keep learning. And I think when I've seen it, sometimes the lessons like that, it's like, wait, me being in a loving feeling of just a feeling of love for humanity, like I don't need to suffer even though my heart can go out to somebody. And so if I've had experiences like that, or even, I don't know, like, I don't know why I went off on that train. So sorry, but I guess that was like, I'm not like, you need to do more work and you're highly sensitive. And it was like, I'm very okay. And even being able to discuss it, because I had brought that up to my mom when we were together. Yeah. And she said, oh, Lil, that's so interesting. Because she said, I can watch the news. And it's not, no one's good or bad. And she said, maybe I'm heartless. Or I don't know what she said, which was totally. No. And I said, no.
You're just not affected by it in the same way.
You know, but I think before I couldn't even discuss it because I had so much shame. Like, especially after 9/11. I don't mean to bring up all these things.
No,
like, what's wrong with me? Why is my brain replaying the images?
Right.
And why do I have to, have to avoid the news when other people can watch it? And now it's like, oh, sometimes whatever, not like it gets under my skin. I don't know what it is. Sometimes like I just love me, but I love my mom and I love everybody that can watch it. Like it's not black or white. And there's just so many ways that I can notice and very kind of effortlessly take care of myself and still shine my light and try to do the best I can to love everybody, including me.
I think it's funny that you brought it up because as you were talking about that, I was going to ask you if you identified as a highly sensitive person, because I do as well, and as an empath. And I think that it comes to when you work with that, it's realizing, like you're saying, it's just differences. There are things that people like us cannot do. that other people can. But there's also things that we can do that other people can't, that are like superpowers of the highly sensitive, of just being able to process deeply and connect the dots and find patterns. I mean, people will be like, how did you put that together? And I think this is the depth of processing that's a gift. But it doesn't make them, like with your mom, it doesn't make you worse because you can watch the news. You're not heartless. You just aren't affected by it as deeply. And it's, again, seeing that just everybody's on their own journey and we all bring unique gifts to the table and nothing's right or wrong. But I think that also, society typically hasn't been super accepting of highly sensitive people or empathic people, of like, why are you crying about this again? Or, and you're like, I'm sure growing up, you got that, I got that. Why are you worrying about that? My ex-husband used to be like, just relax. There's like a meme on Instagram about, with some guy with the Titanic theme, like sailing off into the sunset. It's like, my husband going to get a Nobel Prize for curing my anxiety by telling me to just relax. And I was like, I so relate to that, because he did not understand how I operated, and I would try to have compassion for him of like, you can do different things than I can. And, so yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's just learning to know yourself and accept who you are and what you can and can't do in the world, which is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I think also I used to think something was wrong with me, but also then think something like was wrong with my ex-husband. I'd kind of like would be this twofold of judgment.
Yeah.
Judgment of me and judgment of others. And I'm just in less judgment.
Yes.
Which is like, there's not, I think I just have so much love and understanding for, my thinking is less black and white. Yeah. It's not like there is this right way to be.
Yep.
Also, I do notice that when my mind's quieter, I'm not as sensitive, say, to bright lights or noises. And I used to think that was more fixed than I think, to me, it is.
I relate to that.
Sure, I might have a preference for like different lighting, or like not going to a restaurant that
really noisy.
Some of the acoustics where people are talking and then there's music on.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like I used to just sometimes most of the time I'm actually totally fine with it. And I just notice, sometimes I'm not. If there's just more noise in my head, I am more sensitive to noises or sounds or smells than other people. But I'm actually, like, my tolerance is higher than it used to be.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it also is like some of this I do think comes with age. Like I love aging.
Oh yeah.
I love being in my 40s.
There's a letting go that is just, it's epic. Yeah.
Where like when I was younger, but what's wrong with me? And now I'm like, this is me.
Yeah.
And so,
Yep.
But I think also because of that also helps settle the nervous system too. It's like the judgment of myself or others, or there's something wrong with me. What I know is our brain doesn't speak English. So that judgment that like, if everybody just did it right, or if I did it right, kind of then sends this like message very innocently that like, there's danger. And so I think when I'm in less judgment of others, or I know when I'm in less judgment of others, I'm in less judgment of me. I'm not broken. There's nothing to fix.
They're not broken. There's nothing to fix.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. My body's like, it's safe to relax, so I'm much more in a relaxed state more of the time, or that's my normal. So when I'm not in it, I'm like, oh, wait, and I catch, or like I'm on to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, I don't need to be doing this. It's fine. I kind of identify, we've talked on this podcast before about awakenings. A lot of people have been on and talked about that, and I relate to it as well from the last couple of years. But when the switch that flipped for me was, I noticed all of a sudden, instead of looking at everyone and judging where they were and be like, don't you understand how to do this? Or myself too, why am I doing it this way? All of a sudden I was like, oh, you're just on your journey. And it's not for me to fix. I just hold space. If you want to talk about it or whatever, that lightness is just, it was life-changing to feel that, to stop judging and just see people in a more compassionate light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about your program,
okay.
Peace from Within. There are a couple of different ways to work with you. One is one-on-one coaching, as well as the Peace from Within community. So when people come to you, how do they know, which of those options is best for them? And how do you, because I'm sure they come to you having tried all the things that you've tried, right? I've been meditating, I've been doing breath work, and I think something's wrong with me. So how do you take them through this, and what does that success look like?
Yeah. Well, often people will just join the community, but some people will want to work one-on-one, and usually I'll just have a consultation with them just to chat. And I think both are great, and sometimes it depends on, I guess, a financial thing. If someone's like, I just want a few sessions, I'm like, join the community.
Yeah.
Because, and so oftentimes, even if people work one-on-one, I give them just free access to the community because there is such a huge video library, and I have kind of just a basics course, a foundational course, which no video is longer than 30 minutes there. I wanted it because I can see the completion rate.
Yeah.
And I wanted it so people can join. And also I have so many videos.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to have to think they have to watch all the videos. So I wanted them just to have a simple course where they could be like, oh, and so I see it pages and pages, 100%. Like everyone's watched it.
It's very accessible.
Very accessible.
I love that.
It also just kind of keeps it broad about just sharing how we work as human beings. And then if they want, they can go and, okay, I'm going to watch the health anxiety sections, the ones on intrusive thoughts. And I've had so many guests from, trauma and insomnia and, different psychiatrists, or this one's on physical symptoms. But just watching those kind of, and I think the first one might be, there's nothing wrong with you, and you have wisdom waiting to break free, and noticing without judgment sets you free. And but if I'm working one-on-one, we'll do a consultation and then we'll just have a conversation and see where people are at. And so with that one, it's kind of more personalized.
Yeah.
I might recommend a different starting point based on where we're talking. And it just sometimes all we need also is just to talk because they have the whole hour or more. And we'll talk and something might spark and I might say, oh, read this chapter or listen to this podcast or here's this video of me. And then we'll talk again in a couple weeks. But the same also, actually people get so much support. It's really what they make of it in the Peace from Within community, the membership, because there are some people that come and show up every week. Because every week I do weekly live coaching.
Oh, I love
once to twice a week. Every Tuesday, it's at the same time.
For the whole community. So everybody can come on and get that from you.
Everybody can come on, and I stay as long as I can, which is sometimes 3.5 hours. So it's usually 2 hours. But it's interesting because even though there's a lot of people, the calls are still relatively small for me.
Yeah.
I was talking to a colleague. I'm like, there's still just 17 people. And he's like, that's big. And to me, I'm like, it's so, I've been running groups for 17 years. And so I love groups.
I love that.
And so there's oftentimes the same people will show up and they'll say, okay, so I got the job, or I'm pregnant now and I'm going on the vacation, or they'll update us.
Yeah. And everybody gets to support each other, which is really cool.
Yeah. And that's
you feel less alone.
That's then the coolest part. Because I started the community, because I really wanted a place where all my stuff could be, but that it was in a financial way that felt good to me.
Yeah.
Where I didn't have to say, also, because there's nothing wrong. I want everyone to be rich and make a great living.
Yeah.
But for me, I didn't feel comfortable with a $6,000 coaching package, which there's nothing wrong with it. I might do that one day.
Sure.
But I always want something that people can be like, oh, this isn't a financial stressor.
Yeah.
And there's so many people, because I have forums where you can ask questions and share your wins. And also people can opt out of the ask questions section.
Okay.
If they don't want to hear.
If they're not comfortable.
I don't want to hear other people's questions. So, but I check it every day. And sometimes twice a day to write back. And people already beat me to it. And I was cautious because I'm like, wait, I don't want people to say, hey, have you tried breath work?
Yeah.
And nobody does. Everybody is there. Really kind of keeping to just this simple understanding. And there's people have made friendships. There's a group of women who live in 3 different countries who are best friends.
Oh my
God.
And
they met in the community, and 2 of them I know they're soulmates. We're gonna live together. One's in the United States, one's in England. But they'll send me videos of the 4 of them celebrating each other's birthdays, and they'll watch movies. And so friendships like that, but also just other people connecting off of the community, or really providing such amazing insights, and just people also knowing they're not alone. And so it's I'm a support, but there's a whole whole group of people. And also that then sometimes or often they've had their own insights and they'll come on and be guests. I have another person who is in my community she's going to lead the call on postpartum anxiety. I had another person who's going to lead the call on intrusive thought. So it's like really, really cool.
Yeah.
I could go on. And so for some people, I don't know. I'll pause there, but was that helpful?
No,
or
no.
was that answering it?
No, this is great, because I think the idea of a community, I mean, as you're talking about it, I just think about people feeling there is something wrong with them. The community in and of itself innately addresses that there's not anything wrong with you, because there's other people. And if other people, there's no wrong, right? Like, the word wrong is just like, so, judgmental in and of itself, right? So it's like this, it's normal to feel this way. See all of you feeling that way. And like you were saying, people come on and they're like, well, there's something wrong with me. Or, like we were saying, like, oh, my brain, my crazy brain, or whatever. And it's like, oh, actually a lot of other people, I hear about ADHD all the time. And I'm like, I think everyone is ADHD. I think Sharon Salzberg, the meditation teacher, said, you don't have ADHD. The world has ADHD and we're responding to it. And I was like, yes, preach, sister. So just having this community so people can support each other and come together and find other people is really beautiful. You and I were talking about success, because I think one of the things I love about Peace from Within is that we were saying, like, meditation feels like another thing to do. And therapy seems like it never ends. And we were talking before we recorded that my physical therapist said, if I do my job right, I never see you again.
Yeah.
You might come back from another issue. You might have hurt your hip, but I fixed your shoulder. But I'm curious, you just teach people to basically be free. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that so much. So what does success look like when people, whether they're in the community or they're working one-on-one with you or both, what does that look like for people who participate in the program?
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. It is freedom. It is ease. And oftentimes when I've asked people like, oh, what would success be? It's interesting. A lot of the time they say, okay, I want to go to dinner. I want to drive. I want to experience a little anxiety, and it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised when I heard that multiple times. Some people do say, I want no anxiety, but oftentimes they say, I want anxiety to show up and it's not a big deal.
Because you can't heal in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have clients who I've probably talked to for my whole career. I probably have 10 but they don't experience anxiety or panic. But every few months I'll talk to them because their life is happening. Mm-hmm. But we actually are they'll call it like a tune-up. And I've known, one person in particular since before she was married, and now she's married and pregnant with her first child. And so those people really aren't experienced. Most people, if they show up to the community or we've worked one-on-one, they don't consider themselves really to have disordered anxiety. They don't experience panic. And there are some people who I never talk to again because it's just not front page news. Either they do not have panic attacks anymore. They don't consider themselves to have OCD, and they might get anxious sometimes, but it's not a big deal. Like they're not
pathologizing.
They just are like, why don't do anything? And so, and there are some people that it's like just a month in the community or 2 months, and they're like, I don't need it anymore. Or a lot of people are like, I get probably messages like that every day, like, hey, they'll cancel it, or they'll say, can you cancel it for me? I haven't been on here for months, but I'm okay. My life has changed. Like I'm fine to. I just had a woman who just has been in here less than a month, and she was on the call, and it was such a great story because she's like, I drove to a new town that I haven't been to since 2018, but she said, because what my kind of approach is also, you're not forcing yourself to do exposures, and because also I'm not knocking that, but for a lot of people, then they put more pressure. Yeah. And so this woman said, in all my years of therapy, I've been trying so hard, and I've been in here for like a few weeks, and she really wanted this type of dairy-free cheese. That is, she said it's the best. It's like VO Life grilled Mediterranean cheese. Because I'm like, what's this cheese?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
So she
drove all this way.
She's like, I usually get it delivered, or I'll go to my local Whole Foods. She's like, it wasn't there. It was in a couple towns over. She's like, but I really wanted the cheese. And she said, and nothing happened. And then she realized, well, I could do this all the time because nothing happened. And it was like, she's like, I guess I felt maybe a little weird, but it was like no big deal. And for her, so she's starting to see that. She's like, I haven't had, sure, I've had anxiety, but maybe it's not been a big deal. And now she's getting a surgery. So that's kind of what we talked about. She's kind of realizing, wait, I think maybe this kind of same ease even applies in a hospital with surgery. So sometimes people, I don't know how to say it. Also, it goes way beyond. Like, they start to realize these insights about their work or just like their family relationships. And so that's oftentimes where people will just stay because they're like, oh my gosh, I came in here for driving, or I wanted to be comfortable staying alone. I'm just feeling so much better. Like, they just realize all of these insights in so many different areas.
Yeah, they apply in many situations.
Yeah. And they're like, wait, so this applies also to just like self-confidence and my ease with my career and even health and even here. So some people, they kind of get what they're looking for and then they're like, I'm good. And some people leave and then they want to come back because they're like, I missed it and I really want to. I was just talking with another person who runs it, and I think because the price is lower, sometimes people just love to, like, they feel like they can stay and they missed it and they wanted to just stay in the conversation, and actually they really like seeing people's wins. So there's not like but success is that what people realize is they had it within them all along. Yeah. Like, it empowers them. And like, oh, I have everything I'm looking for. Just sometimes my head gets noisy. And they start to notice if they're feeling anxious or in a low mood. Oh, I'm just going to leave my thinking alone. Of course, it's going to be weird and distorted and tell me I'm broken and not enough. Leave it alone. And then, their state of mind rises, their head clears. And it's like, oh, and I have everything I'm looking for. And so that's success of people just kind of realizing there's nothing wrong with them. There's less for them to do. And it brings them back home, back inside.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, they just keep learning. Oh, there's less for me to do even here. And I had this insight on vacation, or I had this insight at work or in surgery. And they just and some people love to just come back and share it and share
the progress, basically,
share their
they're
progress.
Making. Yeah, and that's helpful for other people. What I love about it is it's first of all, everybody can do it because it's inside of everyone, and it's really like just changing a mindset and believing in yourself and just accepting, which applies everywhere. Like you said, it's not just to driving, or not just, whoops, I'm gonna have a panic attack, or I feel anxious when I'm about to speak in front of a group or something. It's that feeling anywhere, and people are surprised by it, but it's like, yeah, you just flipped that switch inside of you. Maybe it was turned off, and it was dark, and you went boop, and like, oh, and it helps. You can use it everywhere. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So with everything that you have been through, which is a lot, starting at childhood and thinking your parents were going to die and you would be alone, and everything that you have shared today here for me is a podcast about the power of choosing yourself. So what would you say is the most important thing you have done to choose yourself?
That's such a good question. I guess I've just never given up in a way. I mean,
perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
Just staying in it. It's like, oh, a new day. And a new day can also start at 2 p.m.,
And the flexibility and the grace of that. Yeah.
I guess not being hard on myself. Yeah, maybe perseverance and it is, I guess I unconditionally love myself by choosing me, and forgiveness too.
Yeah, that's
forgiveness
huge.
For me being, one of my mentors said that he called himself a lovable mess. And I love that. And that really, I think that I'm a lovable mess, and I choose me because I also love lovable messes.
Yeah. And literally everyone is one.
I know.
Right? When we talk about we're works in progress all the time, everyone's a lovable mess. I wish more people could get on board with that, because like we were saying, everyone thinks they're isolated and feeling scared or anxious or however they want to identify their feelings. And it's like, we're all that.
Yeah.
Thinking that you're unique is isolating you from other people.
I know. And then because he said, Lily, I'm going to die a lovable mess. And he's so successful. And I was like, he said, I'm pretty successful at which and I changed my life. So I said that to my brother when he was going through a divorce. And I said, and he's like, and that, that's kind of another anchoring thing that is spoken to people. Like, what if the only thing wrong? And also, this is also from Michael Neal, he's the one that kind of introduced me to, what if the only thing wrong with you is that you think there's something wrong with you, which I guess also speaks to, he said, I'm going to die a lovable mess. And I was like, it was another thing that freed me from this illusion that there was something wrong with me with exactly how I was. And so I guess that's how I choose me, is like, I'm perfect exactly as I am.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for the work you are doing. You're setting people free and you're helping them be here for themselves by accepting themselves. And I love that.
Thank you so much for having me.